morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to another PorscheCooled Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things Porsche. Those of you who know me already know my name is Michael Barth. This is an extension of my YouTube channel. This is an extension of our love of Porsches. This is a celebration of our love of Porsches, and we are the PorscheCooled Podcast. Steve always joins us on this podcast. He's been joining the PorscheCooled Podcast now for a lot of episodes. I can't even remember. I think it's 10 episodes or more. This is episode 34 if you've been following. And today we're going to talk about the 996 again, the Porsche Generation 996 that came out in 1999. Anyway, we'll get into that when I get Steve on the line. So Steve is going to join us again by Zoom. As you guys know, Steve is in Australia. He's in Sydney, Australia. And I'm in London at the moment, so we do this by Zoom. And I always say this, but I apologize if there's issues with the audio. I think I've got it the best I can possibly do through Zoom, but it's not perfect, I know, but we're trying to get it better. But there are limitations using Zoom as our means to discuss. As I said before, I don't record it through Zoom. If you're doing these sort of things or you're thinking about doing a podcast, never record it through Zoom. Always record it through Audacity or GarageBand or something similar like that. Anyway, it's Wednesday morning here in London. I've got my third coffee, actually. I've got my third coffee of the morning. Do you believe that already? And I'm going to get Steve on the line now. I'm just going to connect to Zoom, and then we'll start talking about what's happened in our Porsche week. We're going to talk about the 996 generation, and we're going to talk about would we buy one? Okay, let's get Steve on the line and we can start the conversation. All right, so Zoom is on. I think Steve is there. He should be there because I was just talking to him. Hi, Steve.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, mate. How you going?
I didn't actually check your levels. Hopefully your levels are okay. But I know you can see them there, so if you make sure they're okay, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, it'd be cool. It'd be all right.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome back. As I said, PorscheCooled Podcast, you know where you are. This is the weekly podcast that we do. I did say last week and the week before, I think, that I'm going to do another podcast that will have another episode every now and again. That's still going to happen. I know a couple of people have sent me DMs. People have sent me DMs, Steve. Yeah, they have. And I haven't answered them. And I apologize. No, I do. I apologize for that because I've actually had a bit of a rough week. I don't want to get into it, but I had a rough week, so that's why I haven't answered. But I will answer the people that have sent me DMs. I think there's 2, 3.
Cool.
But like I said, do have one person lined up, which is Nick, who owns the Carrera 4S. I was going to keep it a secret, but I'm not.
Go, Nick.
Nick, who has a Carrera 4S, so Nick's going to be on. He'll probably be on the first episode, so we'll try that out as a trial and see how it goes and see if you guys like it. It's basically we're gonna call it. Steve and I worked out. We're going to call it Owner Stories, PorscheCooled Owner Stories. That's what it's going to be. So if you want to be on that, if you want to be on that, just reach out to me or Steve. But Steve probably won't answer you, so it's probably best to reach out to
me. Anyone that's tried to reach out to me on Instagram or any other social platform, I'm really sorry, but you know.
Like I said, reach out to me, guys, because you're more likely to get a response. All right, so today, what are we going to start with? Today, we're going to talk about the 996. And I guess we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about it right now. We're going to talk about a few other things first. But the general episode today is about the 996, and I know a lot of you guys are interested in hearing about the 996. Steve's keen to talk about the 996, especially as a 997 owner. Probably how much he hates the 996 is probably what he's going to talk about.
Could be.
But we're going to talk about the 996, and we're going to talk about what's happening with the 996. I have done a couple of podcasts on this before Steve joined the podcast. Kind of an extension from that, kind of going on from that. But I know you guys like to hear about the 996 as well as the 997, so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to chat about that today.
Well, it seems to be all the rage, doesn't it?
It does. But like any 911. When the curve changes, as you know, it changes very rapidly. And I'm talking about price.
Yeah.
It becomes a very steep curve It comes very steep very quickly. And this is the problem with finding the right 911, isn't it? That if you wait too long, if you hesitate, you cannot hesitate with 911s because you never know when they're going to turn and when the price is going to become quite ridiculous.
Yep.
And I think that has already happened with the 996. I mean, it's happened with the 996 already.
Is it?
So
Okay.
I think the way people, sorry, Steve, I think the way people look at the 996, and we'll get into this, but I think the 996, people look at it as a cheap 911, a 911 that they don't have a problem modding, as in changing the wheels, painting it, putting ducktails on it, putting, silly spoilers on it or whatever. People don't seem to have a problem doing that because of the cost. And I know that you can still find them very cheap in the US, right? So I know in Australian market they're not. UK market, I noticed they're going up as well. But I think because it was cheap, people thought they could just mod it out and it's okay. I think this is what happens with every 911, and a lot of early air-cooled 911s have been bastardized. 928s actually, 928s and 944s are a prime example. They've been bastardized by people who have owned them before. Bastardized by the fact that they've just done things to them which are just not period correct and just look wrong in my eyes. But anyway, we'll get into the conversation in a second. Since last week, Steve was talking about a book that he bought. We're just going to bring that book up because I know Steve's read it, so he can give more insight. It was 911 Love RS book, which Steve got, and I just got delivered yesterday, and I haven't even looked at mine. Is it good, Steve?
It is really good. My wife bought it for me, and I've got tons of Porsche books, but I don't generally, like I think I said it last week, half of them are still in their wrappers, but this one's really good because it's not just a coffee table book. I think it's a couple of German guys that wrote it, not that makes a massive difference, but goes through each model beginning at the original 911R, which, to be honest, I actually had no idea about, so that was quite interesting. And then as it explains the kind of history and provenance of each model, they then kind of found owners of said model and just told a little story about, how they felt about their cars, how they acquired it, the backstory to it. It's really good, really, really good. And like a couple of people in there, like you remember how we mentioned people like Jeff Swart. There's a story about him in there. I think he was GT2 RS and his Pikes Peak run in it. And Michael, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Michael Mauer, he's now the head of design at Porsche. He pops up in there. I think he owns a 997 GT3. Anyway, so it's a really good book. It's really good. I'd highly recommend it.
So it starts at the very first RS, correct?
Starts in the R and then goes to the RS. Yeah.
Starts at the R and then goes to the RS. Yeah. RS, obviously, everyone knows means Rennsport or racing sport, translated literally in English. And it goes all the way up to the 991.1 or 0.2 GT3 RS?
0.2.
0.1, right?
Because it goes all the way
0.2.
It goes to the R. It goes to the 911R.
Oh, right, so it goes all the way up. So it's actually current all the way up. It's quite a new book. I think it is quite a new book. I know it was, and I did mention this last time, I think it was out of, you couldn't find one for a while there. There was none available. So I don't know whether this is a second edition or they updated it, but it was, I know it was unavailable for quite some time. But it's a great book. Just wanted to touch on that.
Cool stories.
Yeah, and that's what's not...
The owner stories are really interesting.
That's what's good about it, owner stories. That's what we like our podcast. It's owner stories. It's your and my story, Steve. Our 997 story.
Well, it made me realise too, because quite a few of the different people that they kind of just obviously interviewed and just chatted to own, like many of them, I guess because you're talking RSs and Rs and all the very sought after kind of models, they've got, multiple kind of 911s. It makes you hanker for more than one.
It does. We should talk about that later on. It does. I think, I was saying to Tasha last night, not last night, the other day, my wife, as you know, I was saying to Tasha, I think, in my head, it's like three. The three, I want like a three collection. You know what I mean? So
there's one for a podcast.
A GT, an air-cooled, and maybe keep the 997. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a 3-car collection. I have to get a bigger garage, but a 3-car collection.
Yeah, did you
And
see...
that shouldn't cost that much more per year to own 3 cars compared to one, right?
Did you see Nick Murray posted a little YouTube vid with a 964 on it, the blue one?
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it on his Instagram, and I saw that he was going to sell his sell things because he said it was so great. The 964 was really, really good.
It's only a short vid. His mate owns
Is
it.
it? I haven't watched the video. I only saw the pictures on Instagram of the blue one.
Yeah, it made me think about mine. But it's like, that one that features in his latest YouTube video looks really cool, and I think just the way that he shot it, all the angles were sort of low down and everything, so it actually looked really good too.
I think the 964 is a good-looking 911, and I know I wasn't always a complete fan of it. And
yeah, I was never.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I like the 993, but like I said, on car sales in Australia, there's a midnight blue 993 for sale in Kiama in New South Wales for about 120. And then there's the 964 for sale for 149. The guy that didn't wash it, the oak green, or not oak green, it's called fern green, is it? I don't think it's oak green, it's the other green with the tan interior, and that's 150. So there you go. Like the 964 is, and they both got about the same amount of kilometers. They both got almost 200,000 kilometers. And the difference is 120 to 150. I think that's a true indication of the market, actually. I think that guy with the 150, I think he's being pretty reasonable with the price. I think because there was other guys on there that were selling them for 165, 170.
Yeah. After we were chatting about it, it made me sort of just ponder it a little bit harder, and maybe the opinion that I have of those is also, again, from my own experience, is because my 993 was tweaked. So I think a lot of the opinions, etc., that I read from other people is like, oh, it's a little bit kind of soft and squishy and, it doesn't have the same character and everything. My 993 was standard when I bought it, but I was pretty quick to kind of, in my opinion at least, start kind of sharpening it up. So it had a short shift kit and the exhaust was done. It had the PSS 9 Bilsteins on it, blah, 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 blah. So,
but you did more than that, didn't you? It was more, I mean, I remember the ad from Autohouse when they sold it recently, and they said it was similar to an RS. You'd actually thought about the mods, which were all your mods, right? Or your modifications.
A lot of them were. Not all of them, but a lot of them were, yeah.
But it was more than that, because you changed the front spoiler as well. You changed the front end, didn't you?
Just the front bumper. Just the front bumper.
That was an S, wasn't it? S front bumper?
Yeah.
So it has the bigger air dams at the front, correct?
Yeah, I just liked the look of it because I didn't like, I had the chance to kind of swap it out. So, so like it made me kind of think about, for example, the difference between driving, say, like my uncle's 95 993, which was a Tiptronic, which is exactly the same as mine, but mine was a manual. His was completely standard, and after I thought about it a little bit harder, it's like, yeah, it is. In absolute bog standard form, it is quite soft compared to the 964, but I'd argue that once you sort of tinker with it a little bit more, I'd still kind of go, I'd probably prefer it, but they're both great.
It's weird. It's weird though, because when you bought your 993, the 993 was the pick, right? People didn't really want the 964. The 993 was more sought after, correct?
Sorry, say that again.
If you went back to 2004 when you bought your 993,
yes,
the 993 seemed to have more interest than the 964 at that time.
More.
It's only been recently
much
where the
more.
964 has become the driver's car, the more raw sort of car, basically.
Yeah, and see, that's a bit that I'm not sure in absolute bog standard form, I can sort of understand where people are coming from, but I don't think you kind of have to go too far on a 993 to actually shift that. It's interesting because this might actually be a reflection of the same conversation with a 996 and a 997 maybe.
Yeah, it kind of is, actually. And I think that's why it's good to talk about it, because 964, 993 is like 996, 997. But will the 996 become more sought after than the 997? See, I would say no. I would actually say no. That's
what I thought about a 964 and 993, to be perfectly honest.
Exactly. So in 5 years' time, we'll be saying this. Well, we didn't see that happening, and it's happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because it is the first water cooled. Because it is the first one after the 993. It was such a big shift such a big shift in design and such a controversial shape and whatever. You know what I mean? Soap dish, as they used to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll get into it. We're probably already getting into it. I don't know about saying getting into it. I just want to say a couple more things. The Curves magazine that I was talking about, that I bought the one that Curves drives, Soulful Driving magazine. If you go to their website, it says Curves magazine. I bought the Southern Germany one, Steve.
Yep.
And when I bought the RS book from Amazon, I also bought the Italian one, the Italian roads one. It's a really good, it is like a map. They give you a map inside. There's some sponsorship from Porsche because the map has Porsche on the back, a Porsche ad or something.
Yeah.
But it's just pictures of the roads and telling you about the journey that you should do. Nick actually got me onto it. But I bought the Italian one because I think there are two areas where, just trying to get motivated. To get out of this normal life. But I didn't mention sorry, I'm getting onto the point. I'm so like daisy today. Their YouTube channel. I forgot about it. There is a YouTube channel called Curves Magazine.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go to the YouTube channel, the new book for Southern Germany, they actually have a video of driving through some of those roads, and they have the ones in Italy. So I forgot to mention it last time. It is a good. They've got some nice videos on there, really nicely shot drone footage, on these roads. It's and really cool cars too. Really nice Porsches, like rare Porsches. So check that out. It's just Curves Magazine on YouTube.
The founder of the magazine is one of the owners interviewed in the book, in the
Stefan Bonnier.
RS book. Something like that.
Stefan Bonnier. Yeah.
I think, is he an ex-ad guy or something? He talks about I can't remember what car it was that he owns, but how he kind of.
You should have wrote it down, Steve. Take notes.
That the magazine
Go on.
that the magazine was actually, he didn't intend for it to kind of turn into like a fully fledged kind of publication.
He's got there's so many issues though. Like I said, the early ones were just in German. The new ones are in German and English. So many. He's it's reasonable good reading. It's dual language, but it's reasonably good reading, and it's makes you inspired. Basically, it gives you some inspiration to go out and get out and drive. Cool. Basically, as Mr. Walker would say. So what else? We were also talking last week about the drive going to Tasmania. We both knew there was something happening. There was a Targa drive in Tasmania. We didn't really know much about it. I had someone reach out. Didn't we talk about it?
Yeah, we did.
Did you know anything about it? I thought you didn't. You didn't have any information.
I just said that driving in Tasmania would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. And I said, you catch the ferry across. That was our extent of our information, which is a bit weak. So a listener from Australia, David, I think it was David. Yes, David. He had some info on that Tasmanian Drive. Apparently, he did it. You can do it with the Porsche Club of New South Wales. Basically, you drive your cars to Melbourne, as we know. You catch the ferry across to Tasmania, and then you drive around the state on many Targa sections. Lots of different cars there, classic, new Porsches, water-cooled, air-cooled. And it's basically run, Porsche Australia, he said, run a group of cars in conjunction with all the Targa events, and then 30 cars, limited to 30 cars, and you can go up to 130 kilometers an hour, which is fast, right? So they mustn't.
Is that alongside the actual Targa Tasmania event? Is it sort of like a spectator type thing?
Yes, I think so. Because it says 30 cars. He says that you can. Have you heard about that? So 30 cars can go, and you can be a part of it, and you can get to drive all the twisty roads through Tasmania as part of the Targa thing. Cool. I'm not sure how much it costs. I'm sure it costs. I'm sure it's not free. That would be a pretty good thing to do, Steve. Imagine doing that, taking the GT3 over and doing that. That would be a cool thing to do.
That would be mad.
And I think that's what's great about Porsche ownership, isn't it? Is that these organised events, even if they're just through Porsche clubs. I noticed Autohouse Hamilton are doing their 3-day trip. I noticed some pictures on Instagram.
Yeah, that looks cool too.
They're on some. That looks really cool. And it's not just Porsches either. I noticed there's some Jaguars and other odd cars in the pictures they're putting up on Instagram.
Yeah, they've done that for a little while, but I think obviously because of COVID, I think they sort of pulled back. But
right,
they always look really fun.
Yeah, I wish I could do more of those drives. I mean, I have to say, not having a 911, and then I read these books, this Southern Germany one, and then Nick, who I've mentioned before, he's organising a thing in next year for next October, some drive. through Germany and etc., or through the Porsche Drive with Porsche friends, that he said I should join. But to join that, I would have to buy a 911 in the UK,
No,
which I
hire
said
one.
to him
Can't
which I'm not sure about it.
When I went to the Porsche Museum, you can hire a 911.
Yeah, I know it's about €400 a day.
Yeah, but it'd be worth it. I actually think it really would be worth it. Like
This is a 9-day. This is a 9-day or 10-day drive tour with fellow Porsche enthusiasts.
It would be cool. I think I sort of said it to you when I went to Germany, however long ago that was, a couple of years. The issue for us as Aussies is that we drive right-hand drive, and when I went to Germany and had to jump in, albeit like a shitty Golf diesel wagon, acclimatizing to the other side of the road, plus manual, which like shifting manual stick with your right hand instead, like, geez, that messed with my brain. It took me like 3 out of 5 days to kind of acclimatize. So I reckon if you jumped into a Porsche and you were trying to do all of that, you probably couldn't do it like in one day.
See, I think I'd be okay, because I think now that I'm so familiar with left-hand drive, and I know the American listeners are going to be laughing about this, because I'm so familiar with it, because Bahrain is left-hand drive, and that's the first time I've actually, Bahrain's left-hand drive. That's what I said.
Oh, I
to
didn't
you.
know that. Okay.
Yeah, I drive left-hand drive in Bahrain.
Oh, I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I had to keep in my head when I first went there. It was always keep right, look left. I was like saying this mantra in my head: keep right, look left. Keep right, look left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was this thing. But now, because I've been driving that shitty automatic, I think I could drive manual now. I said to Tasha the other day, I said I'm pretty sure I can drive manual, because because I've driven quite a bit there, and I'm quite used to it.
Okay.
And they're crazy, and because there's such crazy drivers there, they don't use in Bahrain. They're not crazy drivers. I shouldn't say that. In Bahrain, the indicator is not really something that is used. So they don't actually even use it when you're on the 120 kilometer freeway, which is a lot of the roads are 120 kilometers, a lot of the flyovers. Right. And most people go faster than that, and there is no indication. So you can imagine when you're changing lanes and someone just changes in front of you without indication. But it happens all the time. Yeah. There's no use for indicators. No point.
Some would say a lot of Australians feel like that as well.
Yeah, no, it's worse in Australia. But I think I could actually drive a stick left-hand drive now, Steve. I think I could actually do it.
Oh, you can definitely do it. It just takes a little while to kind of get used to it, that's all. And I just imagine that if you flew in, went straight to a kind of, 911 from the Porsche Museum, and you only had a day with it, it's like, want to sort of make sure you get used to it before you kind of jump straight into something like that.
I don't know what the hardest thing I found with driving a left-hand drive, apart from the, keep right, look left thing that you have to remember when you're going to roundabouts and looking and stuff, was reversing. I seriously couldn't get used to turning my head to the reverse and look back, because I still do the old-fashioned thing where I don't just trust a revision camera or revision mirrors. I look back. And when you're on a left-hand drive looking back, I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? In fact, the first time I drove the car in Bahrain and I took it out of the garage where we live, I actually almost got jammed in between two pillars because I was reversing in and out.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm stuck. How am I going to get out of here? And the concierge actually came out to help me, to guide me, because he could see that I was struggling with it.
Oh, big car too.
I mean, what a fool. What a fool. Anyway. All right. So the 996. I mean, most people know what the 996 is. The Generation 996. The Generation 996 came out in 1999. It was cut off, discontinued, or superseded in 2004, right? The first 997 was announced in 2004. Well, I'm actually sure it was announced in 2000. But I just want to go back to my story, Steve, because as you know, like years ago, and I'm trying to remember what year it was. I feel like it was only 5 years ago, but maybe it was longer than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 7 years ago. But my early searches when I first wanted the 911, which I'd never followed through on, as you know, I was looking at the 996. Actually, before the 997, I was looking at the 996.
Yep.
Because at that time, I wanted GT3.
Yep.
And the GT3 997 was way too expensive. And GT3 996s, even with Club Sport, from my memory, they were 90 to 99,000 Australian dollars, which was very cheap at the time. And we're talking low kilometer, good example 996 GT3s. In fact, some of them were, I think there was one in the 80s, which was a red one with high miles from my memory.
Yep.
So I was looking at those because it had the Metzger engine, and I was also looking at the turbo once again because you told me it had the same Metzger engine. It didn't have any issues with IMS, RMS, etc.
Yep.
And the turbos at the time, in fact, the turbo at the time was about the same price as what I paid for my 997 3 years ago in 2017. I remember there was a 30-odd thousand 996 turbo, and it sat there for ages, and it was about 88,000 Australian dollars,
Yep.
which is what I paid for my 997.
I remember there was that great speed yellow one at Auto House as well. That was a little bit later than I think the time that you're talking about right now, but I remember that sort of being maybe about 120 maybe?
Yeah, it was about 125. I remember that. I think it was about 120. Yeah, that's when they went up because they were sitting below 100, and then they went up to about 125, and then now they're sitting a good one. Now you're looking at 165, 170. So you would have made good money on that if you would have bought one. Would have paid for everything that you'd done on it, all the maintenance and everything.
Yep.
So that's where my early searches started, and I guess that's because I was trying to search for a certain price, and then I wanted something special at the same time. I didn't just want something standard. You know, I always want the top end. I don't want the cheap thing. I don't want the entry level. Funny in saying that because I ended up with an entry level 997, but as you know, I'm happy with that. There's not a problem.
Nothing wrong with
and I
it,
guess when you're buying your first Porsche or 911, and I guess when you're looking now, people would be looking at 996, correct?
Yep.
And Boxster or Cayman.
Yep.
And Boxster and Cayman, I'm talking 986, so the first generation, maybe the slight update 987. I notice people who buy Boxsters, people are keen on the 986, maybe because it's the price, it's quite cheap. So that was the selection that you had, right? Well, that's the selection that you have now. That's basically if you're looking to buy those sort of, if you're wanting a 911, that's what you're looking for.
Yep. It's a Porsche on a budget, right?
Porsche on a budget, yeah, Porsche on a budget. So that's what I was looking at, right? And I think this is what happens today. You're looking for a 911. You're looking for something that's going to give you that driving experience. That's going to give you what a 997 does, what a 991 does. That gives you the feel of the road. That gives you the experience, right? So you're looking at a manual. If you look at a 996, there are still bargains to be had. You're not outpriced out of the market at the moment. And I know the US, and I keep saying US and UK and probably Europe, the prices are much lower than countries like Australia. Australia and even Southeast Asia countries, I had someone reach out to me, the prices, how expensive they are in, not Singapore. A guy reached out to me and was telling me about the prices of GT3s. And China, actually. It was in China. And they're very, very expensive. You know what I mean? Like much more expensive than Australia.
Yep.
So I think there's still bargains out there. And I think when you buy a 996 or when you buy any 911, you can't be too fussy. Do you agree? I don't think you can be too fussy when you're looking at those sort of cars.
How do you mean that when you say?
I mean, you can't...
Fussy in terms of
You can't be too hung up on the options. Yeah, I think it's just the specs and the options. I don't think you can get too hung up on options. I think if you find a good 996, let's just talk about 996, but if you find a good 996, maybe it's got high mileage, right? Now, I read something the other day. I think I read it. Yeah, no, I read it on Renlist or somewhere. Hopefully it's true. That basically, it was a Porsche specialist site I read it on, that a 996, basically if the engine hasn't had IMS issues at 50,000 miles, then you're pretty safe. That it's going to be pretty safe, that you're not really going to have any issues. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but it comes back to the thing about a well-driven 911 is better than one that's not driven that much. And maybe
I think it's also that... with those engine issues, they sort of said, is it statistically that it was more likely to kind of happen in the earlier models? So therefore, what year was that? 1999, say? If that was a 1999 car?
1999, yeah.
So by now, most of those cars would have either had the problem and gone away, or... had the problem and been fixed, or had the engine replaced, or had the liners replaced, or whatever. So similar thing, I think, happened with 964s and the sort of screwy gasket and on the head. Like because the car is so old now, like basically hopefully a previous owner at some point in time will have kind of taken care of it. So it probably shouldn't really be an issue anymore in 2020. I think that's the kind of basic theory.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, we're getting into more the mechanical issues and whatever about the 996, but I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry. I'm just sort of saying that because the car is so old, if those kind of issues had kind of arisen, because it's so old now, that it's likely that if the car is still on the road, that it probably would have been addressed.
Yeah,
and that is a common theme with like different generations of 911.
Yeah, and you'll notice that you noticed on ads for the 996, most people say the IMS has been done, the RMS has been done, so the intermediate shaft, the rear main seal, these are done because they're labour intensive, they cost a lot of money. At the same time, most people will do the clutch, so you'll see that they've done the IMS, the RMS and the clutch at the same time. I'm not sure of the kilometres or year, how long the IMS solution from LN Engineering lasts. I can't remember what the figure was for that. I'm sure it's a lot of, you have to do a lot of miles on the car before it would have to be replaced. I think it doesn't last forever, like anything, Steve. No, I don't think it lasts forever.
Does.
But nothing does. But you're right. You're buying a 996 now. I mean, the thing is, and I'm kind of jumping forward here, but the thing is, as long as the car has a really solid maintenance history, it has a very solid maintenance history. It's had regular oil changes. It's had those major things done to the car, like the IMS, the RMS. Of course, when you're checking the car, other things like cars that are over 20, that are 20 years old already.
20 years old,
Yeah, exactly. You're looking at you're going to have suspension needs to be changed. If people haven't changed the tires will be out of date. The interior could be a bit shabby, which needs to be upkept. But I think, you have to weigh up the pros and cons when you look for these cars. And that's what I'm saying. You can't be too fussy on the options. Like if you look at a car, I think with the 996, as long as your interior is a dark color, I think the 996 doesn't look good. The light color interiors with that dash just doesn't work. When you see the tan interiors and the full red interiors, it kind of doesn't work.
But yeah,
it doesn't. I think it doesn't work with the styling of the dash. It always sort of, and I know a lot of turbos, the Turbo 996 have the reddy kind of interior. It was kind of the thing at the time, the grey, the seal grey, and the red interior.
And it was Boxster red interior because I think that was a bit of a thing with particularly Boxsters, but Boxster red was that sort of interior colour that was all the rage.
Yeah, and the 996, it was a new platform. It was a new platform, for Porsche. In 1999, right? 1990. When was it? 1999.
99. Yeah.
Yeah, 1999.
Yep.
1999, right?
Yep.
What did I have?
The last one on through was 1998. So
I had 1997. Was it released in 1997?
Probably that's when the show car was released.
Yeah,
but
and
the
as
last,
we all know,
the last model of 993 was 98.
Oh, right. Okay. So it was very controversial, and it was controversial because of because it went from air to water, and everyone was cool. Everyone was, the favorite of the air-cooled 911 and the traditional, the 911 they've been doing from their inception. And then it changed to water cooling. And also the main thing that people note is obviously the fried egg headlights, which people are starting to like more and more now. I know when I see used ones for sale in Australia, I know some people have upgraded the headlights to Lintronic or some kind of LED headlight. I don't think it looks right. I think it looks wrong. I think you keep the original headlights on it. I think when you try to make it look more modern, it actually looks older.
Yeah, I'm not exactly familiar with what you're talking about, but because you're not talking about the second generation headlight, which was sort of more like the turbo style that lost the little amber bit and it sort of changed the shape, so it differentiated it from the Boxster.
Yeah,
you're not talking about that.
Yeah, of course. The first generation 996 had the amber color, and then it changed, and didn't look so fried egg anymore. It was upgraded to what the turbo had, right? So it was it was a better shape, and it didn't have the amber indicator underneath.
Yeah.
Now I know, Peter, there was a couple on sale on car sales in Australia, and I noticed that they'd upgraded them to this xenon type LED headlight, which almost looked like it had a ring inside. It almost looked, like what the Gunther Works have. I mean, obviously there's a company making these headlights. I don't think it suited the 996, especially in its base form. I mean, obviously when Singer and Gunther Works upgrade these lights, it works because the whole package is updated. I think when you just update the light, it looked a bit odd to me. Because I know there's a convertible for sale, a cabriolet on sale, and there's a hardtop, I think, for sale, a coupe, which has got this upgraded lighting, and I just don't think you bother.
I think the
doing
biggest
that.
criticism of the first gen 996 was that, it's obviously true, because they released the 986 Boxster and it was exactly the same front end, like from the windscreen forward. If you were kind of approaching one, you couldn't tell whether it was a Boxster or a 996. And obviously that kind of got a lot of 911 owners' noses out of joint, because the 911 is arguably supposed to be a more special and more expensive kind of car, but you couldn't tell the difference between that and a sort of poorly Boxster kind of thing.
Well, that was the criticism, wasn't it? Because the first generation, it had the same lights as the Boxster.
Yep.
The 996 had the same interior as the Boxster.
Did it?
You agree? You don't agree?
I'm not sure. I actually don't know.
It did. It had the same. It had the same interior.
Boxster didn't have 5 dials and all that. You're talking just the center console bit, are you?
Yeah, the center console.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So the Boxster also had a very similar interior. It didn't have the 5 dials, but it had the same center console. It had the same look, which Porsche changed later on, so it was more unique to the Boxster. But that was the other problem, that you're buying a 911. It's got the same headlights as the much cheaper Boxster at the time, and it's got a very similar interior apart from the dials. That was also a thing that
measures.
Yeah, and it was a thing that also gained a lot of hate. You know what I mean? A lot of people hated the 996 because it was so similar to the Boxster. If you look back at earlier articles, the big benefit with the 996 though from the 993, and I read this stat on 2 sites, so I'm guessing it's true, was that the 996 was 80 kilograms lighter than the 993. 80 kilograms. So they really did make it lighter, and obviously making it lighter also made it faster. I'm guessing the 0 to 60, 0 to 100 times were actually much better than the 993. I don't know the exact figures, but I'm guessing they were much
undoubtedly, better. Like you're talking about Porsche kind of thing, like undoubtedly the newer car would always kind of perform better. Like it would have been not just lighter, but it would have been faster. It would have handled better. Like I'm sure lap times would have been much better. I'm sure the ride versus kind of grip and handling kind of equation would have been better. Like it's just technology. It would have been arguably a better car. It's just one of the things that probably is kind of a little bit hard to get over. Say, for example, for me, I'm trying to think back of me in that sort of time, would be, and this isn't just against 996, this is probably a 997 thing as well, like the feel of kind of solidity, because like that thing that I bang on about, which is when you close the door, does it feel like, like a tank? It doesn't. It feels much, much lighter, and when you look at the materials of the plastics and everything, it feels sort of cheaper and plasticky, because the truth of it is they changed their sort of manufacturing process. They weren't screwed together anymore. They were kind of clipped together. They got those Toyota kind of specialists to sort of help them streamline their manufacturing process. Yeah.
Toyota?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Two people that used to work for Toyota kind of helped them figure out, because they were on a cost-cutting mission. Like Porsche were in trouble, so they had to kind of work out how to make cars more efficiently. And but that's obviously a slightly the two conversations kind of going on there, because one of them is the perception of kind of quality, and then the other one is, well, like how does it drive kind of thing. And well, I guess there's another bit to it. It's like, how does it look?
So Porsche became more automated. So the production line became more automated and less handmade as what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So the air-cooled are heavier because of that, and the air-cooled also have. You get
it's
back
just
to
the feeling. I don't know
the clunk and the feel of the air-cooled.
Yeah. Which is why when you kind of you jump in a 964 or a 993, and everybody sort of says, it's like it's carved out of granite kind of thing. But you jump in a 996 particularly, and I would argue that a 997 is improved on that, but it's still not the same as like 964 and 993. It's quite different in the feel of it.
But this is the quest to get production to lower costs, like you said, to actually save money on the production line, and also to reduce weight. and then to reduce weight, and then also to make the car faster, because, even the market today is about, cars that sell, they always sell it on the 0 to
Performance
60
numbers.
time or the 0 to 100 time, right? So it's all about that pressure for sales as well. So they have to do it. They have to do it so that everything changes, sometimes not for the best. But I think, I think those disadvantages of the 996, or those criticisms of the 996, Steve, I think they are quickly disappearing. It seems like they are quickly disappearing. Like, it seems like a lot of people, and maybe these are 996 owners, people are, praising the 996 headlights, how different they look. People are saying that the look of the 996 is so unique. It is the first water cooled. It's gonna just appreciate in value. And I think the tide is obviously turning, and the market is turning. You can see it.
It's subjective too. Like, looks, nobody can kind of stand up from up high and sort of deem which one is the better looking car. Like, that's purely up to your own kind of subjective kind of opinion sort of thing. And I actually think part of it is, like, the way that we talk about it is that we have the perspective of a 997 sort of owner. So, like, if you could pretend for a second that you didn't own a 997, would you be as critical of a 996, do you think? And I'm not sort of saying that you're slagging it, like when I say critical.
No,
but
I'm not slagging it. I think different 911s for different tastes. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem with the 996. You know that. I actually don't have a problem with it. I quite like the turbo. I like the 4S. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't think even though I look at them, I don't think owning a 997 Carrera, I would want to buy a 996 Carrera. I don't think I would have one of either. I don't think it makes any sense.
Yep.
But I think the 4S, because of the wide body, obviously the 4S is getting a lot of praise as well, and the 4S prices show that. 4S prices worldwide are going up.
I find that one interesting too. I thought about that because I know, like, we were talking about it in last podcast, the one before that, because arguably, like, the four-wheel driven 4S wouldn't be sort of like the purest choice, if you know what I mean. So does that mean, like, people are kind of praising the 996 C4S more because of its looks as opposed to its performance?
I think it is to do with the looks. I think it's because it has got the turbo body, because it is fatter, because it has, all those extra. Basically, well, it's basically it's basically the turbo, right? It's pretty much all the turbo features.
Yeah.
That the 996 4S
Without
got.
the turbo,
but you're right. It's the rear wheel. It's 4-wheel drive system. It's not rear wheel drive, and we know purists, Porsche purists, and this is a taste thing. But Porsche purists prefer the rear wheel drive. But the 4S is bucking that trend. The 4S is showing that the 996 4S is appealing, and prices show it. And I'm going to refer to Australian prices again, Steve, but for the listeners, but they were sitting at 60,000 Australian dollars, and that was for a really low mileage one. I remember there was one for sale in Sydney, in Chatswood in Sydney, and the guy wanted 62, and it had like 40,000 kilometres, and it wasn't that long ago. It was really not that long ago, and I remember people saying, I won't mention the forum, but people saying on whatever forum it was that price was way too high. How could a Carrera 4S be that high? 996. And now you're lucky to get one. Basically, they're sitting around 90,000, 89,000, and they sell. And especially manual. We're talking manual here. I mean, obviously the Tiptronics stay for longer, but you wouldn't buy the Tiptronic, you'd buy the manual. And they're selling for 90,000, and that's
so the question
in a short period.
The question I have with that, though, is that, okay, like, you kind of go, so if that's 90 grand, at 90 grand, is this conversation purely about the dollar value? Because at 90 grand, would you choose to kind of pick a 996 C4S, or at 90 grand, would you choose to kind of take your car, like a really good 997, like a pristine 997 Carrera?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The 997 Carrera 2, I guess, is sitting about that price for a good one, right? 997.1 Carrera 2 is still sitting pretty much a little bit more than what I paid for it, but it's sitting about that price still. I mean, there's people that try to get more. I remember, Classic Throttle Shop, I think, had one for 106,000.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So people are trying to get more, and I don't know, they seem to sell. I don't know if they are selling at that price or they're selling less, but they still seem to sell. Yep. The other day when I searched car sales, and I think I might have mentioned this previously, there was only one 997.1 Carrera manual for sale.
Yep.
One. Like, it's got to the point now, even when I was looking, as you know, there was only a handful, you know what I mean? And this goes back to being fussy about when you're looking for it. There wasn't many 997s, but I think that's a good choice, you know, a good thing that you said, a good, what am I trying to say? You know, the fact that a Carrera 4, that a Carrera 4S is the same price as a 997.
Yep.
Now, what would you rather buy? And I have to say, if I didn't have a 911, I'd still buy the 997. I wouldn't buy the Carrera 4S.
I agree. I would too. And I'm not sort of saying that to kind of shit all over a 996. I just kind of go, and I think maybe we possibly have a biased point of view because we're both 997 owners, but I do remember sort of thinking back when I was driving a 993, it's like, oh, 996, yeah, I'm not quite sure. How do I feel about it now? I think my taste and opinion is sort of evolving a little bit with the time as well. Like, I'd love GT3, but, you know, like obviously that's a sort of GT car and different engine, blah, blah, blah. Turbo, same thing.
But just back to the prices, though, Steve. It's odd because it doesn't feel like the 997 prices have adjusted yet for the increase in the 996 prices. Because I don't know whether you saw it. There was also someone trying to sell a Carrera 2 996 for 70 odd thousand.
Right. Yep.
You know what I mean? And then 997 Carreras, when they come up, are still around that 89 to 95,000 Australian dollar mark.
So it's only sort of say like 15 grand premium to get from one to the other. Like
it doesn't feel
kind of
like the market. It doesn't feel like the 997 prices have adjusted based on the 996. And this is what we go back to this steep curve with Porsche prices. When they happen really quickly. Look at the air-cooled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They went from 30,000 to 150,000 Australian. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy how quickly they increase. And you can see it's happening with the 996. You can see it. Not that long ago, I remember seeing used 996 with 100,000 kilometers for $39,000.
Yeah.
You know, those same ones now people want $59,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And some people want $70,000. So it's happening very, very quickly.
But is that potentially because like pretty much every other 911, so like anything pre 993 backwards, or you know, obviously like all the kind of newer ones in terms of like a 991, you basically if you want to jump in a 911, you basically can't afford one unless, you know, the absolute kind of bare bottom dollar is, you know, whatever it is, like 70, 80 grand, and it has to be a 996. Is that the reason why?
Maybe.
That because the market for 911s in general has kind of gone up, is that dragging 996 up with it? And again, that's not me sort of saying it's not worth it. It's just, is that part of the reason why?
It's just the general pricing. Yeah, probably. I mean, look at GT3s. You know what I mean? 996 GT3. No, actually, look at GT3 RS. Well, GT3 RS is different, isn't it? Because the GT3 RS and the 996 sells for around 300K. The 991.1 GT3 was selling. There was quite a few, which people have all put their prices up now, was selling for around 330 Australian dollars, 330,000 Australian dollars. And then 997 GT3 RS is selling for 370, 400K Australian dollars.
Yeah.
So, you know,
GT cars might be sort of slightly different, I guess, because there's supposed different sort of car, but yeah. I know. But
it's hard to read the market, isn't it? Here you come in, you know, we're a first Porsche. We want to buy a 911, and there's a lot of. I'm telling you, there are so many people that tell me they're looking for the 911, and then most people say they're looking for a 997. I don't get, and maybe that's because I have it. You know, people know I own a 997, so people reach out to me because they're looking for the same car. I very rarely have people say I'm looking for a 996.
Yep.
They usually say they're looking for a 997, and I think the market now is pretty hard. If you're wanting to buy your first 911. Like we said, we're talking about 996. You look at the 996. Obviously, you would look at Carrera 2. You'd look at Carrera 4S. And you'd look at those in manual. I don't think a first buyer would look at a turbo or a GT3 because I think the price would turn most first buyers off. And I think it still comes back to that fact that if you're a first Porsche owner, most first Porsche owners won't want to get straight into a fast Porsche. They won't want to get straight into a GT3, I think.
Don't know.
You know what I mean? Because your skill level and stuff like that. Because if you haven't owned a Porsche, maybe you think, you know, it is a sports car. You think, can I handle it? Can I drive it? And we both know, we all
no
know from
idea.
owning a 911.
Because possibly, like it might be you, like if you're taking kind of you're just sort of speculating or taking guesses. I would have thought that maybe somebody getting into a first 911 may be coming from something like an M3 or a AMG C63 or something like that. Sort of seems like a natural kind of progression to me. But I do know what you're saying.
So, it's not easy. It's not easy. Like I said, the pricing curve is steep. Porsche prices go up quickly. Your option now, with a 996, you obviously have other options. You can think, do I want a 997? 997 is a little bit more. Or if you can't get into a 911 because the prices even of 996s are too high, you have the Cayman S manual option, Steve, the 986 Cayman S. Or if you want a soft top, a drop top, convertible cabriolet, you've got the Boxster. I notice Cayman S's are really dry in the market, especially on Australia. I haven't checked the UK Auto Trader, but I see that there's only one manual 986 Cayman S. I think people have really bought up on those because they were, for a $50,000 car, I think they're sitting at 50 grand. They're pretty cheap for what they are.
Probably also because they're such good value, but then also because with the 718 they went 4-cylinder, so anything with a 6-cylinder probably kind of got snaffled up as well, and there was probably a bit more of an appreciation for it at that point.
Yeah, but if you're buying a Cayman or you're buying a Boxster, you would buy if you can't buy a 911, for example, you would definitely buy the S. We wouldn't buy the just the standard Cayman or the standard Boxster.
Would you? Afford it, absolutely.
In a 986, you buy the S. Obviously, when you buy a 986 in the Cayman and the Boxster, you're going to have the same IMS, RMS issues as the 911, as the 996 911 and 997 911. Like I said, services, make sure your service is done. And also the trick is apparently when you buy or when you're doing a PPI that you get, I don't know if you can do an oil change on a PPI, can you? Is that you need to look in the filter, right? Because the filter will show fragments of metal, which is a test to make sure that the bearing hasn't already started to fail.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. So 906, like, I think the thing about it, like, and this is going to sound like a massive kind of cliche, but, I think a 996 is still a 911, so any 911 is a good thing. Like, I wouldn't sort of, if, again, because we're sort of talking about it from 997 owner's point of view, it might sort of sound biased, but I have a feeling that, like, 906 would be a great car, and probably similar to what I was sort of saying about my 993 is that if you're any sort of enthusiast, you're kind of looking for if it's your first 911, you pick up a 996, no doubt you're probably, if you're enthusiastic, you're going to wind up sort of playing with it and tweaking it, and it's only going to get better in terms of the experience itself. Another one of those kind of cliches is that when you're behind the wheel, then you're not really looking at the headlights. So maybe the kind of subjective opinion on the looks sort of, falls out as well, because it really is about the driving experience. So I'm sure once you kind of get behind the wheel, you tweak the exhaust, you do like half the things that we've talked about with 997s, and it's going to be a good thing. I don't think you'd kind of be complaining. I think from a 997 owner's point of view, like a mate reached out to me, I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, when I had my 993, my mate had a 964. He sold it, he had kids and all that sort of stuff, so he had to kind of get out of it. And he reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and sort of said, hey, what do you know about 996s? And it's like, well, not really, not that much, to be honest, and I don't really know that many people that have had them, but it's like what I just sort of said. Like, I'm sure it's a fun thing to have, but my question would be, can you live with the interior? Like, can you live with the looks and the feel of the interior? Because if you can, then I'm sure from a pure driving experience, sort of like going for a fang down, National Park or all of that sort of stuff, like, I'm sure it's great fun. It's just more whether or not how you feel about the looks of the interior and stuff like that. If you find yourself a good one, then, you're laughing kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. And I think if you find it, I mean, if it was me, I would still look for one that's 2 2002 onwards, I would still look for the one that had the slight model facelift.
Yep.
That the IMS changed, the bearing changed slightly, the intermediate shaft. The headlights definitely look better. Porsche no longer shared them with the Boxster, which I think is important. And then your engine capacity went from 3.4 to 3.6 litres. Now, that's the same time, that model facelift was the same time when Porsche originally had the Carrera 4 in the 996, which Tasha's old boss used to own, which was still a really nice car. And then they got rid of the Carrera 4 and they just had the Carrera 4S, which was a big improvement. But Carrera 4s, if you don't have a problem with the all-wheel drive Porsche, Carrera 4s are actually quite good value. I saw one that's been sitting on car sales for quite a while, a seal grey one, in excellent condition, even with the original wheel caps with Carrera 4 on them. They haven't been changed, like immaculate condition. I think the guy won a 55 or 59 and it had really low kilometers. And I think that's a pretty good buy. You know what I mean? And I guess the ideal one is to get a Carrera 2 manual if you want the proper Porsche 911 driving experience. But, if you come across a 4 or 4S at a good price with good maintenance history and, I
guess another Porsche cliche.
You would be tempted, right? You'd be tempted.
Yeah. Part of it is buying the owner as well. Like you can tell when a car is owned by somebody who is enthusiastic and, is willing to kind of put the money into preventative maintenance or, like even one step above that is somebody who's enthusiastic and will kind of go and, do a little bit of modding or whatever. And it's pretty, to me at least, I think it's fairly obvious when it's owned by somebody who kind of cares about the car, and you just want to find a car that is like that. And it's probably, I guess that's where it's more important with a 996 with some of those issues that you find something that's sort of well looked after.
Yeah, like we said, with a 20-year-old car, that the main things are done: the IMS, the RMS, the clutch, and if suspension has been updated and they've replaced because it's worn out, those things are a bonus that are not going to cost you. And when you buy a new car, obviously, one of the first things you probably normally do is you need to get a major service. So that's another cost that you have to add to your buying expenses. But to pay a few $100, but you know what I mean, Steve? To pay a few $100 or a few £100 to do a PPI, it's invaluable. You know what I mean? It's such a little bit of money. Before you hand over all your cash, it's only $400-500 or whatever. How much it costs? It's like it's a no-brainer. You just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that I think you also have to be realistic. It's a 20-year-old car, well, thereabouts. Like the thing ain't going to be perfect, so it's going to need something.
Something is going to have to be done. You have to realize you're going to spend money on it. Something's going to have to be done to it because it's 20 years old. And the fact when you get a PPI, as we all know, you get a PPI, you have bargaining power before you buy the car. You know what I mean? It gives you a means to negotiate, and it gives you a proper means to negotiate, just not like you're a tire kicker wasting someone's time, because you've shown that you're serious. You've got a PPI. You want to buy the car. You want a discount because the suspension's worn out or whatever, or the IMS hasn't been done. And I think most, and remember the IMS, I had a look yesterday. The IMS to get done in UK is £1,500 plus VAT. So £1,500 plus 20% VAT. So it's about £1,800. So it's £3,500 Australian dollars. I thought the IMS solution was only about the one they do from, most people do from LN Engineering was only about 2,000 Australian, but obviously it's gone up. So that's from, I think that was the price from RPM Technic, a specialist here in the UK. So, it's a big cost. If it's been done, that's a big help to your budget.
You just factor that into your budget, basically. Or if it hasn't been done, you use it as a negotiating tool, I suppose, and try to go halves or something like that.
Here's a question, Steve. Being a 997.1 GT3 owner, being a Porsche enthusiast, having owned air-cooled and water-cooled 911s, would you buy a 996 GT3?
Yes.
Would you buy the Mark 1 or would you buy the Mark 2? You remember the differences, right?
I do.
So, should we tell the differences? The Mark 2 has more power. It was better brakes.
Everything, isn't it?
Upgraded brakes.
Tweaked suspension. The looks of it is different. It's got the bigger spoiler. The brakes, I think, was sort of one of the kind of bigger differences. And didn't they say the suspension is harder? It's a tighter kind of everyday drive, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, The Mark 1 wheels were slightly... Did you like the Mark 1 wheels? They were the ones with all the bolts, right? I think the Mark 1 wheels were actually better than the Mark 2.
BBS, the 10 spokes.
Yeah, which they changed for the Mark 2. They got rid of them.
Which are sort of more like the ones on my car, which are sort of more, the Fuchs-inspired wheels. I wouldn't kick either of them out of bed. I reckon they'd both be kind of great. Like if I had a choice, probably the second gen, but I definitely would not be complaining about having a Mark 1.
Well, they say the Mark 1 is... They say, I mean, obviously the 996 GT3 has gone crazy prices. But the Mark 1 apparently was rarer because they built less. They didn't build as many Mark 1s. So that obviously is something. It was the very first GT3. So it was the very first one, whether or not you want to buy the very first one. But then collector-wise, I guess it's quite collectible, the Mark 1.
I think I read in that book too, the RS book that we just spoke about, that the first gen was made in the motorsport factory, whereas the second gen was built on the normal Porsche production line, I think it was.
Well, that's
so
interesting.
There's all these little nuggets and facts where people kind of justify which one is sort of better or worse or whatever.
I mean, it means the Mark 1 should be the one to pick, but I'd probably go the Mark 2. But the Mark 1, they say, well, it's interesting you're saying it was built in the motorsport factory. The Mark 1 is supposed to be more like a race car. It's supposed to drive more like a race car, right? It's a bit
because
harder
it was a proper homologation sort of thing.
Yes.
Like it was built so they could kind of homologate the...
a bit more twitchy, a bit harder to handle, right? The power. And isn't the GT3, the 996 GT3 RS the same? Apparently the 996 GT3 RS, being a brilliant car, but you really do know how to drive it. You really have to remember what's under
because there's no traction aids. It's all your right foot basically, because there's no stability control. There's got ABS, but it doesn't have PASM and ESP and all of that type of stuff on it.
Right. So compared to the new GT3 RSs, it really is a raw experience. It's a true racing experience.
Yeah, I've never driven one, but I'm like, it's basically the engine in my car is an evolution of that. I mean, and it's an amazing engine. So I don't think you'd be complaining if you were kind of driving around in a 996 GT3. And that question that I sort of posed before, which is, could you live with the interior? Got the Metzger motorsport engine behind you, and you're kind of hooning around in a GT3. I'm pretty sure you can live with the kind of slightly questionable sort of interior.
I think the driving experience would override that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, let's be honest too, I think the cachet of kind of having, like what is quite a rare car, blah, 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 the fact that, it's appreciated by enthusiasts, it's going up in value and all of that sort of stuff. The pose value of that also kind of goes with it. So,
yeah, I think for me, for the like I said, if I had the 997 Carrera and I was looking for a second, and I was looking at 996s, I probably wouldn't get a Carrera 2, even though I've spoken about it before. I mean, Carrera 2 could be a project car. I think the price of 996s is getting too high now for it to be a car that you just, do a lot of mods on. I think it's, I don't know, I think it's like you want to have it as an original 996. You want it more collectible for me because it is more classic now. But I would not overlook a 996 GT3. I still think the 997 GT3, I like the looks of it better. Obviously, I like the interior of it better.
Yeah.
But, if a good 996 GT3 came up, I mean, the right price maybe, but I think the prices of them are a little bit high. But I still would go 997. I would still go 997. I do like the Carrera 4S though, which, I still got a bit of a soft spot for that car.
Yeah, I'm guessing at that point, if you're kind of comparing a 996 GT3 versus a 997, it's really going to be more about what sort of budget you're kind of playing with. You're going to be limited by budget basically, because I think when I shifted out of the 993, I think I sort of tried to kind of weigh it up, and I think at the time that I'd sold my 993 with the intention of getting into a GT3, I think it was about a 30 grand difference between the 996 and the 997, and for me it was like, okay, like if I can stretch the extra 30, then I really would much prefer the 997, and that's just what I sort of set my target as.
Obviously, both cars, 996 GT3 and 997 GT3, are getting harder to find. I mean, there's less coming up for sale in the market that you're in. In Australian market, there's less coming up for sale. Obviously, there were not that many sold, so that's always going to make it harder. But they are getting harder to find. Eventually, you know, it worries me with the 997 GT3 because I do want one, and I've said this to you before. I think it's going to get to a point where it's just going to be priced out of the market. You know what I mean? It's just going to be priced out of the market.
I don't know.
Especially with people now listing them for like almost 300,000. You know, 295,
But they're not really
275.
the question I have about that, and I'm not trying to, obviously, because I have one, it's in my interest to kind of talk it up as much as I can. Not that I'm of any influence, but
But you're an influencer.
It's one thing, sort of like people advertising at that price, but it's another thing as to whether they kind of literally sort of sell. Like, you know,
Yeah,
I
what do they
reckon
sell it at?
I reckon they're probably kind of selling more at around the 180 mark, and that anyone that's kind of asking 200 plus, like, I'd be interested to know if anyone's actually kind of getting, actually selling them at that sort of price for, you know, sort of like a in quotation marks, a normal one, like not a super low mileage or an RS or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, true. I wonder about that 997 Carrera that I saw at, you know, in Sydney for sale at that dealer, whether he got 107 or whatever he was asking for it, because that was probably the premium, the most highest price that a 997 base Carrera was up for. I think it was 107 or 109, 109 I think.
That 997 GT3 that came up this week, that's got about 10,000k on it.
Yes.
What was that? What was the asking price on that? It's pretty high.
Not Club Sport 275, right?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
275, I think. And then there's another low kilometer one on there, the silver one, which I've got my eye on. That's 230, 240, right? That one's quite a good one, 2007.
Oh, but that wasn't super low kilometers, was it? That wasn't
Club
like...
Sport. It's not that high. Isn't it only
It's not
40?
that high, but it's not like 10,000k. It was sort of more like...
No. It's about 40 or something. I don't mind having 40. 40's okay. I don't do many kilometers in a year.
Because at 10,000k, you're almost in that point where you kind of go, oh, geez, like if you start putting like a couple of thousand k on it every year, then you're really sort of...
Exactly.
You're dropping the value on it. Whereas at 30 or 40,000k, it's like, you can still do 10,000k a year, enjoy it, and not really worry too much.
And the three GT3s that I've spoken about in a very early podcast, which are still for sale. People might remember that episode I think it's Lorbeck. I think they're at Lorbeck or somewhere else. Lorbeck. The ones from that Rusty French's collection, the car racing guy in Australia. He's got the 996 GT3, the 997, and the GT3 RS. High value. I think they're all priced at 400k or 300 and 400k.
Yeah.
They haven't sold.
Yeah.
So no one's bought them, and they got no miles on them. They got nothing on them. So
maybe
low miles sometimes, like you said, it's a bit scary because you spend all that money, and then you go, well, if I drive it, I'm going to lose a shitload of money straight away here.
I suspect you're in the collector kind of market. You're not in, you know, like a you or me kind of thing where it's sort of like your one and only Porsche that you want to take for a spin, you know, as often as you want kind of thing.
It's a buy it up and lock it away Porsche, that one, I think, for sure, especially the RS, the 997 RS.
Yep.
All right, Steve. Have we covered it? I think we covered it pretty well, actually.
I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to remember what the point of the podcast was, but it was.
No, we're just talking Porsche still. We're just talking 996. I guess it's not like a buyer's guide. We didn't want to get too heavily into IMS, RMS, which is always overdone. We touched on it. I think basically what we've talked about is the things that other people are thinking about. I think it's the same sort of train of thought, you know, what do you do? But I think the choices are becoming slimmer. I think, you know, if you want a 911, you've got to work fast if you want one at a good price, because it is becoming fewer choices. Especially you got the 991s coming down to very low prices. I mean, I guess the 991's an option for some people now, the base 991. But
what's the cheapest 991 in Australia? Just roughly.
120.
Oh, okay. Wow.
120 with 100,000 kilometers. I think that 129. I think it is 100,000
manual
kilometers.
Manual or PDK?
I think it's Carrera S too. Carrera S. I think it's the automatic. I think it's automatic.
Yeah, okay.
I saw it yesterday. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's automatic, but I think you can get them for around that price one. But it's not the one. It's not. I say the specifications, options aren't important, but you know, if you're going to buy the automatic, you would only buy the paddle steering wheel, the sport steering wheel one. And I think if you buy a 991, you want that Sport Plus button. I know it's a different topic, but I think you want the Sport Plus button and you want the exhaust option.
Yep.
I know that's contradicting what I said, that don't get hung up on options, but I think with the 991, just with the nature of it, I think you want those two if you can find one with those two options, I think you're pretty spot on. Even if it is PDK.
Yeah.
Well, PDK will have that sport button anyway. I don't think it has it on manual, does it? I think it's only on PDK.
Right.
All right, mate. I think we're done. I think that's it for today. So this episode will go up on Friday, but obviously if you're listening to that, you already know that already. PorscheCooled Podcast. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, mate. Have a good week.
You too. We'll talk more things Porsche next week. This episode comes up every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.